Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I don't know how I'm doing yet, so I'll leave that alone. Um,
Still early.
please tell us your name and share anything with us that will help us get to know you a little bit better.
My name is Jesse Hamilton McCoy II. My friends call me just Jesse. And I am one of the professors that teach the Civil Justice Clinic at Duke University School of Law. But that is not all that I do. So I am also an avid podcaster. I am an author. I am a part-time poet. And I am a community activist of sorts. So I am very involved and try to be very well-rounded and holistic.
Absolutely. That sounds absolutely wonderful. So tell us, how did you come to law? How did you decide law was a career you wanted to have? How did that happen?
So I actually grew up in Durham, North Carolina, in very different times than what Durham is now.
Right.
And I grew up in a very, very poor neighborhood, poor community. And one of the things that people used to pick on me about when I was young was I actually wanted to be a doctor. I didn't know how you go about being a doctor, but at the time we had seen shows like Doogie Howser and all these medical shows, and it just looked like the kind of profession where I could help people and make a lot of money and buy my mom a house, because that's every kid's dream.
Absolutely.
Right? And so I wanted to be a doctor, and people used to pick on me because I didn't know what I was doing. But I ended up having a really bad run-in with police. It's the first of many. When I was early on in high school. Mm-hmm. So when I had these bad run-ins with police, one of the things that triggered me was that I saw the degree of power that they were able to exercise, not just on me, but on everybody in my community. And we were essentially powerless to do anything about it. On top of that, I have a very old school type mom who believes that if police ever interact with you, it's automatically your fault. So I feel like there was a mark of shame from the first incident that I was trying to explain, because it was no fault of my own, but it's hard to explain that to somebody who thinks police are always right. So I feel like it was something I was working towards for most of my life. In that moment, what I started to realize is I wanted to be in a position where I could make the police officers feel the same degree of anxiety that they made me feel. And so I said, the only thing I know that I've seen people get antsy about is being an attorney. Mm-hmm. At the time, I knew nothing about what attorneys do. I had never met any attorneys, never seen them, didn't know they existed. But I said, this is ultimately what I'm going to do. So I shifted away from science and medicine and put in a focus on improving my writing, reading books from all over the place. Mm-hmm. And trying to kind of formulate what I wanted to be and how I wanted to use a law degree. But the path here hasn't been easy. So for many people from my community, I think a lot of folks take for granted the obstacles that you have to get over in order to even see college. Yeah. At that time, Durham, North Carolina was boasting a 32% graduation rate for African-American males. So in a class of 560 people, we graduated 212, mm-hmm. Right? And out of the 212, everybody who was African-American male who did go to college, we knew each other. We were like this. There weren't many of us, right? So I was fortunate in that I received a scholarship to attend Florida A&M University. And I went to Florida A&M University, immersed myself in a variety of studies, had probably the best 4 years of my life there. But Florida A&M used to have this thing called Law Day, mm-hmm. where they would have law schools send representatives, anybody who was with ABA. And they would come down and they would talk to interested students about law. So my goal had always been be in Florida A&M for 4 years, come back to North Carolina, figure out what I'm going to do about law school. At the time, the only law school you hear about really is Duke and UNC. Central we knew about, but nobody really talked about it a lot. Mm-hmm. And there was this rumor in the community that Central wasn't really taking in African-American students anymore, despite being an HBCU law school. Now,
what year was this?
Well, this would have been 2000. Well, I was in undergrad, 2001 to 2005. So
Wow.
yeah, so I think what happened was the community saw a number of people graduating from Central Law School who did not look like the community, and they ran with a rumor that they just, allowed to influence. So when I went down there, I talked to a guy by the name of Dennis Shields, who was in admissions at Duke, and he was very nice to me. He told me everything I need to do step by step. One of the things that I didn't necessarily understand or appreciate at the time was pursuing a legal education is very expensive. And
Very.
I'm not even talking about the tuition. I'm talking about you got to take a test called the LSAT.
Absolutely.
Um, if you don't have money, my scholarship wasn't providing money for a test.
Right.
So I had to figure out how I was going to get the money to take the LSAT. Well, one of the things they tell you is you can't just walk in and take the LSAT. It's not that kind of test.
That
You
kind of
got
test. Same as the
absolutely,
MCAT. MCAT and LSAT.
absolutely.
Same two tests. Yes.
Absolutely. So you have to take a prep class. So then I was like, okay, I'm thinking it's something I can register for at the school. And they're like, no, it's a private class and it costs $700. Like, where am I going to get $700 from?
Right.
So it was just a matter of trying to get all these things to work out, for which I am very blessed and indebted to my undergraduate university. They made sure that if there was money available that I could get to pursue my dream, they would help connect me with a resource. I obviously qualified for pretty much everything that was out there. But I knew that it was a one-shot deal. So I had to take it. Whatever I got, it is what it is. So I took the LSAT, and I just knew I'm going to be going to Duke University School of Law. And sure enough, I got my LSAT score back. And when I talked to Mr. Shields, he was like, obviously, you got to take this all over again. Well, I couldn't afford to take it all over again. So at that point, I thought it's a dream deferred. Like I won't be able to go to law school. So I'm trying to research if I can be a teacher or something else. I started teaching at the local high school my last 2 years of undergrad. And I just figured it's done. But when I came out of that law day, there was a lady whose daughter was interested in going to Florida A&M. They looked lost. I went and took them on a tour to get them to all the places that they wanted to get to. And the lady says to me, she says, I saw you coming out of the law day building. And I'm curious, do you want to be an attorney? And I said, well, yes, ma'am, I do. And she was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Where are you looking at? And I said, well, I've been talking to Duke for several years, but unfortunately, they want me to take the LSAT again. I can't afford to do that. So I don't know that it's going to happen. And she was like, Duke, that's in Durham. And I said, yes, ma'am. She says, where are you from? I said, well, I'm from Durham. And she said, well, have you ever heard of North Carolina Central University? And I was like, yeah, yes, ma'am. Of course, we all know that. And she was like, well, would you be interested in going to law school in North Carolina Central? And I said, ma'am, I would go to law school at wherever I can get into law school. I just want an opportunity. So this is a stranger. She tells me, go to your dorm room, get all of your stuff, and just give it to me. And, I was naive. I was like, whatever. I didn't know anything about identity theft or all that. So I went and got all my stuff and gave it to her. 2 weeks after that, I got an acceptance letter to North Carolina Central University School of Law.
Eagles, always Eagles.
And when I got there, I went to go thank her personally, found out that she was an outgoing dean at that law school. So it was just like, a whole different world. And I went to her office and I said, I appreciate the opportunity that you have given me, and I'm going to try my best to take advantage of it. And she was like, I didn't give you anything. You have an opportunity to do something with. So whatever you want to do is now on you, right? I said, okay. So I went into law school first year. And again, for people who don't know how law school is kind of made up, most of the people who go to law school, in my opinion, aren't from communities like mine, right? So most people go to law school, dad is governor, so-and-so, mom is senator. So it's different. So you have this feeling where you feel like you weren't worthy to be there, right? And it was at one point, it was, I don't know what I did to get here. I don't understand. I'm obviously not what they're looking for. And a professor saw me struggling, so he invited me to his office, and he said, we don't make mistakes in the admission process. And that's all I needed to hear. So I said, okay, if they don't make mistakes, then they have put me here to compete against people who, from my limited perception, were better than me, right? So if that's the case, I need to go into class every day with a chip on my shoulder and just say, I'm not here to compete with you. I'm here to be me, and embrace my difference. And so that's what I did. So there are stories that people can tell you about how, I didn't have money for books when I got to law school. They were already giving out assignments before you even start law school. So I was like, y'all have already read stuff. How am I going to get money to get the books, whatever? Borrowing from Peter and Paul, John, anybody I could. I had a lot of community support. So because I'm from Durham, there are a lot of people at my barbershop, at my church, who would just encourage me and say, look, I got you. If I can help you, then let's get you there. So I'm always thankful for that. I had a mom who didn't have much, but if she could get something for me, she would. So anybody who could help me out, I was able to go through. And even something small as having a free sandwich from Burger King just because somebody worked on the register. Little things like that mean a lot. So I was able to do that. I didn't kill the grades. I wasn't a top student by any means. But one of the things that distinguished me at Central was that I am really big on giving back to the community and making sure that this legal education that we get, which a lot of people view as a pathway to becoming rich and fulfilling their individual dreams, I view it as a driver's license of sort to be engaged in the politics of power, right? So now I have an opportunity to use my voice, my perspective, to bring power to people who have been overlooked and silenced by different political systems that we have to operate within. On top of that, I still got my axe to grind against the police department. So still an opportunity there to go out and advocate for people in my community. And what I realized in getting through law school is that everything that they teach you in law school, they teach you in segments, in fragments, and they never give you what the whole story is. The goal there being, you should be able to analyze why a rule is the way it is so that you can apply that rule to a different set of facts. What I happen to do is I would go back, and because I had access to Lexis and Westlaw and all this new technology I'd never seen before, I could actually go back and do research on who are the people in this case? What year was this case? What was going on that year? Before I can even deal with a decision, I need to know what the lay of the land was in order to get it. And it provided me this perspective where I was able to say, there are some things that the law teaches you that is supposed to be black letter law that is based on conjecture, it's based on nothingness, it's based on arbitrary rules to keep certain people in the population from being able to access the power that they need to access.
Absolutely.
And when you come back with questions like that, that's not gonna make you a lot of friends, right? That's not what they're trying to test.
Right.
Even something as small as like we were looking over a case, our first property case. I'll never forget. It was a case called Johnson v. McIntosh. And basically this is the quintessential property case that established how the Europeans in America were able to set up their own property titling system, right? And if you read the segment they give you, it makes it seem like Native American people who are here, who are indigenous here, who already have been exercising rights on these lands already, didn't do some kind of structure. They didn't build a fence. They didn't build a house. They didn't build a permanent dwelling that would indicate that they have discovered and are in possession and ownership of the land. That's all that the snippet tells you. But when you look up the actual case, what you realize is not only was that boldly wrong, but the Native Americans got demoted to a status of tenants on property, not to owners, despite the fact that they had been here forever. On top of that, you also learn that the indigenous people of this country tried their best to do it the quote unquote right way, because the British power was what was in charge at the time, and the British had their own titling system. So the indigenous people used the British titling system that they were told to use to establish that this property belonged to them. And the only reason that they lost this case, and this is one of the esteemed John Marshall cases, the only reason they lost this case is because America had just defeated the British and they wanted to establish their own chain of ownership. So they basically said, we don't care what Britain did, We don't care what y'all did. It doesn't matter anymore. Americans were going to win this case regardless of what the outcome was going to be, right? And that's your first case, the first day, right? So I said, wow, we haven't even gotten to the cases about slavery. We haven't even gotten to the cases about the criminal justice system. We haven't even gotten anything else. And I already see the slant that the law has already taken in someone who we hold as attorneys in high standards as a jurist. John Marshall is the architect of the Supreme Court. So if this is what his thought was, and he's able to impose such arbitrary rules and traditions, then there's no hope for anybody because nobody else is at the table. So then you expand that and you look at the Constitution and who was in the room making the rules about how this new country would be governed. And it wasn't people like us, right? So the rules from inception were never made to even consider the perspective of anybody who was a minority, of anybody who was indigenous, of anybody who was poor. It wasn't considered, it was if you weren't rich. And unfortunately, the business that made people rich at the time was slavery.
Yeah.
So this is where we're starting from for a legal system, where everything builds off of the precedent that was established before. Mm-hmm. And even though law does hula hoops and jumps ropes and shifts and morphs to adapt to the new time, when the foundation is bad, then the building is bad, right?
Amen.
So part of the job is to somehow condense all of this information about a system that was never designed for people like me to prosper,
right?
And to use it as a weapon to help people who look like me have a voice, right? And it sounds like it's something simple and straightforward, but in practice, that is not easy to do because old habits die hard.
Amen.
So people, judges who have never lived my lifestyle, lawmakers who have never lived my lifestyle, they've never interacted with people that I grew up with. They, in large part, have completely discredited the lies. I think we're seeing that now with the people who are essential workers. They got sent back to work. It didn't matter that there was a global pandemic going on. Right. They got sent back in. Those people tend to look like me, right? And so who are the people who are primarily contracting COVID? It's going to be people who look like me. And they're voiceless and powerless to be able to stop it. Yeah. So in that sense, what I'm saying is the foundation from jump has really orchestrated the way that our politics in general have worked from that time period moving forward. And that's not to say that we haven't made tremendous strides thanks to the good work of people like C.T. Vivian, John Lewis, Angela Davis. We've made tremendous strides. Yes. But at the same time, it's like the strides that we make are largely fighting for rights that have technically already been conferred upon us, but that the states and the individual citizens of this country refuse to acknowledge. And that's why when situations like George Floyd happen, you get this deep divide in the populace about policing, because people who grew up like me have at least 4 stories about police officers who pulled you for being black in the wrong place or being in the wrong side of town or looking suspicious, matching the description.
Right.
But people who've never had to live that lifestyle, when they see police, those are their friends. Those are the people who are helping you. They're always here to protect and serve. Mm-hmm. And when folks from my community try to voice their opinion, it's not viewed as legitimate. It's viewed as, oh, you just hate police. You must be a criminal because you hate police. Mm-hmm. So even smaller topics that we talk about, there's this current push. Let's defund the police. Mm-hmm. And people want to go to the extreme and say that means that folks are advocating for no police to exist whatsoever. But that's not true. What folks are advocating for is we're saying police have too much to do, and their response all too often when it comes to our communities is deadly force.
Right.
What we're saying is you shouldn't be using deadly force at a wellness check a la Tatiana Jefferson, right? You should not be using deadly force when executing a no-knock warrant for somebody who just got off work for helping people get over COVID. Like, that is ridiculous. Breonna Taylor, you shouldn't be using deadly force for somebody who has complied with everything you told them to do for 45 minutes and now is scared because you're trying to arrest them without announcing that you're arresting them. Rashard Brooks, right? Like, you can't do this. And so, because people don't want to see it, you know, I've been through all the stages. Like, I've been through seeing this happen and nobody having a record of it and people acting like it didn't exist. Yep. I've been through Rodney King video coming out and everybody seeing it and the officer still getting off. I've been through the push for body cams and the invention of the cell phone with cameras on it and people taping it and putting it on social media on a daily basis. And it just seems like no matter how much evidence that you bring to the table, people don't want to address it. So what that tells me is it's not a matter of folks not knowing these things exist. It's a matter of will. Folks don't care. Right. They've devalued a certain group of people because they take pleasure in knowing that we are not equal. Right. And I think the problem that I see with that is what we as a community have typically asked for, and I'm speaking specifically for the African-American community, what our community has specifically asked for, in my opinion, is very meager, right? We're saying, can we live without unnecessary police interference? Right. That's it, right? That is not even a fraction of what we are owed, right? Right. So I've been trying to push in the community and through a lot of my work now for this concept of Black equity, right? It's not enough to just say, we're going to stop harassing people. Now it's like, well, no, let's look at the banking system. How much money did banking and insurance generate from the slave trade? Right. And how much of that can we put towards paying people who are descendants, towards paying for, revitalizing our institutions? I've heard so many of these conversations historically about, lift yourself up by your bootstraps and all
when you don't have boots.
When you don't have boots, but this is the beauty of Blackness, particularly Blackness in America. The beauty of it is we have documented examples of times where we did do that. Right. And you still burned it down. Right. So it's not even about, we can look at Tulsa, Oklahoma and say, look, they had a whole thriving Black community and that made the people around them who were poor jealous. Right. And they burned it down. So
don't forget about the Durham Freeway. Don't forget about the Durham Freeway in Hayti.
Durham Freeway, Wilmington, Columbia, South Carolina. I mean, Rosewood, Florida. Like Florida. It's just the game is rigged, right? The game is rigged. Everybody knows it's rigged.
Right.
But the issue is, I get myself deemed the radical by pointing out that the game is rigged. Yeah. The other thing about me, which I guess makes me sort of unique, when I was in elementary school, I was in Vance County, which is a very rural, very poor county. Mm-hmm. And in Vance County, I actually went from being in a quote unquote behavioral class to going into an academically gifted program that was an experimental academically gifted program. What they did was they exposed 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, a small select group, only 8 of us. They exposed us to a college level curriculum to see if we could hang. Mm-hmm. So while everybody else is learning how to read, Dick and Jane jump over the fence, I'm reading about Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Revolution, mm-hmm. right? And the problem is, once you read Vladimir Lenin, once you read Robespierre and the French Revolution, once you read this stuff, you can't just go back. So people are like, oh yeah, Dick and Jane jumping over the fence. Right. You're reading about classism. You're reading about social injustice. You're reading about inequalities. Things that for any other community of people on the planet, these were ideas that sparked violent overthrow and violent revolution. So I think in America, what we have the benefit, at least for now, of is we have asked and demanded most of our rights through non-violent, peaceful protests. And America has yet to see anything to the degree of people rolling guillotines out to kill rich people or people, overthrowing the government and taking over. Like, we haven't seen that yet. And I'm not advocating for that. What I'm saying is, this is what you press people into when you don't listen and when you don't want to deal with the systemic issues they have to deal with on a daily basis. So my goal is to help us not get there by getting us to sit down at the table, talk about the issues that are going on, talk about the inequalities, but not just talk, propose some agenda points and solutions for what works. And maybe the solution works, maybe it doesn't. But I'd much rather see somebody try and fail and we tweak it than to not do anything or study it indefinitely and never come up with any proposals. So I know that's a lot. That's a lot, but that's kind of what I've been carrying along on this journey.
You are not alone. Your story is replicated probably by every Black person in America, and some brown people too. Somewhere you can say that, And I mean, like, I think like where you work is an example of, this lip service, right? We're gonna say we're interested in diversity. We're gonna, tell our Black and brown students we care about them, but what we're actually gonna do in practice is something altogether different. So, like, Michelle Oko,
Yeah, I do.
right. So she's got a year and a summer. Why? Why can't she be a permanent faculty? Several faculty have resigned, retired or whatever it is that they do. Why can't she have a permanent job? Why can't she be there? Because there's something about any attempt to have equality. I'm not even gonna say power. I would just say equality, right? So that I can come in the door and speak to you and you don't even acknowledge that I'm standing there. That you could come in the door and look at me like I am an angry Black woman. I think that's what they classify most Black women as, angry Black women. So, it's very interesting to hear your story, but like, I think when you kind of pull it back from it, right? There's a lot of things in that, right? So, am I safe in my own community? So Breonna Taylor in her home, in her bed with her boyfriend, and no knock warrant, break the door down and dead, right? So that's the really visceral effects of racism. But the parts that's down here, the more subtle pieces, right? So we can eliminate Black faculty. We can marginalize Black students. We can make the barrier so high for them to jump over. We know they're going to fail, right? And so the minute you are able to speak your truth, something happens to you. The minute that you tell what's happening, something happens to you. So you have to be careful. And when you were talking about your mother, so my mother, I'm adopted. My mother was a domestic in South Carolina. And, at the time in South Carolina, they still had the slave blocks up. You could walk down Charleston, you still see the slave blocks up, where they did this, And so, my mother would always caution me, don't draw attention to yourself. Don't make too much noise, don't do this. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, how long has this been going on? Because my mother was born in 1925. So, and this is in the 60s and 70s. You mean we haven't made any progress at all? People like to tout how much we have gotten. Why? I mean, your point about the Native Americans, have they given them back their land? No. They got them over there with casinos. That's how they repaid them. They built them some casinos and said, go ahead on about yourself. There's a high prevalence of alcoholism in the indigenous people. Lack of education, formal education, because you broke in the system that these people had, and so that's what happens with all of these minority communities. They break the systems that they have. Let us push you away and out of my sight, so I don't have to deal with you, right? So, the most famous thing people say, well, the two of them is, I have Black friends and I didn't own slaves. I don't know what my ancestors did, but I didn't own slaves. And both of those things are head scratches. Like, what the hell did you just say to me? Because typically when somebody says to me they have Black friends, I just retort, I have white friends too. I mean, I don't even know what that statement means. What is it that you're trying to tell me? That you're not a racist? The very fact that you made that statement says a whole lot about you, because that never crossed my mind to care whether you had Black friends or not. So the fact that you're telling me that I'm supposed to feel at ease, I'm supposed to feel comfortable, nah. But I do want to go back to something you said, and I want to ask you a question differently. So right now in Durham, we're seeing a revibrance of the community. We're rebuilding it. You got gentrification, you got all this, downtown and all this stuff. And so if you've been in Durham I've been here since 1990. And if you've been in Durham any time long, East Durham, some parts of, I guess what you call downtown or whatever that is, poor people, poor
Right.
houses, but it's their house, right? Somebody
Right.
bought it for $6, $7, $8,000 back in 1960 or something like that. And here comes this person knocking on your door. Hey, I'll give you X amount of dollars if you sell me your house. And so use the number $50,000 or $100,000, whatever it is. And that person thinks, wow, I made it. I got $100,000. I'm going to be able to go out and find me a new place.
Mm-hmm.
No, no. So what is the impact on gentrification for Black and brown communities? And how do we educate them to know what the language is when you hear it? Because, people talk in coded terms, right? So they use coded words. You got to kind of decipher it. So being a lawyer is a very great thing because you can decipher those coded terms. But
Right.
being an average citizen, you can't.
Right, right, absolutely. Well, the hard part about gentrification is I think that gentrification, like you said, is only going to expose they're going to not expose, they're going to exploit the inequities that are already embedded in the system, right?
Absolutely.
So typically what they're doing is they're going into those neighborhoods, like you said, because they know a lot of people in those communities haven't seen the value of money that they are getting ready to provide, even though the person providing those funds knows that that value is minuscule compared to the open market, and that they're going to inflate the price once they do whatever they want to do to the property and sell it to folks who are now coming into the area who have the money to do it.
Right.
So real estate is one of those real tricky things when it comes to racism embedded in the institution. A lot of people don't know that real estate in and of itself had government-backed racism implemented into mortgage documents, housing programs, you name it, on up until roughly 1968. So a lot of the things that people have, like you said, they bought these properties because at one point in time, the beauty of Durham is that we had a very vibrant Black community. W.E.B. Du Bois wrote about how he came to Durham and saw Black hotels, Black haberdasheries, Black restaurants. So we had a very vibrant Black community. And even in the time when I was growing up in Durham, like there were certain places in Durham that people who weren't from Durham just didn't go. Right? You didn't go there. And I think what happened is we created an allure. There's something about, if you go anywhere in the state of North Carolina and say that you're from Durham, there's something about that carries with it some degree of pride, some degree of fear, some degree of something that is more cultural than any other place in this state. And I think what people did was they marketed that. They said, okay, well, I see people with the shirts that say DURM period, Durham or Dirty Durham on decals on their car, like all the stuff that, we got devalued for because back in the day, crime was a prevalent issue because poverty was a prevalent issue. And they used that to create an image of us that devalued our property, but then came in and bought it and made it into an artistic, hip, chic place, right? And now the people in East Durham and even parts of North Durham who don't even realize the shift that's been going on here, they're thinking, oh, well, this is the day I finally get to cash out. And they haven't done any research to find out what's going on with the housing market, where, we actually have a supply shortage in the Raleigh-Durham area.
Right.
So if you sell something you own and you cannot afford to go elsewhere, then that will essentially reduce you to being a renter, which is going to be an even worse situation for you.
Right.
On top of that, I also think that we have, and this is something I talk about a lot, we have a generation of people who have never experienced what a mortgage is, right? So even if you said, okay, well, I have what I need, I have a down payment, I have good credit, and that's asking a lot, right? Like even if you have that, you wouldn't even know what to do to go to a bank and ask for a mortgage. The banks, if they see you come in, they know you don't know what you're talking about. So they take advantage of you with interest rate points and all that stuff. On top of that, banking has notoriously been a racist business.
Right.
So when I used to work with NAACP as intern in 2006, we even did a study where we sent a white tester and a Black tester into different banks with the same credentials and found out that the white testers were getting way better rates and way more money offered to them in mortgage loans than the Black tester. So we know this happens.
Yep.
But you're taking people who have never even had that conversation with family or anybody on this. Everybody has rented for so long that they just think this is part of the process. You grow up, you move out, you rent a place, and that's how life works. And the problem is in Durham, that used to be okay. If you came into Durham and you were renting in the 80s or 90s, you probably would have been okay. But now that it's a hot market and so many people want to be here, the school, the university is expanding. So you're bringing kids from other states that are more affluent, who can do things that the people in the community here can't necessarily afford to do. What's happening now is all those great high-rise apartments, luxurious apartments that are built up, they're not going to be in a price range for the average person working in Durham, making $18,500 a year, right? They're not going to be able to afford that. And then when the push comes, and this is the part that people get frustrated by, when the push comes to say we need to expand supply of affordable housing options, well, nobody on the local level really establishes what affordable housing should mean. So if we use a federal standard, affordable housing generally is somewhere roughly in the area of housing for someone who can make about $68,000 a year. Right. If you're making $18,500 a year, you're nowhere near where that affordability standard is. And because we don't have a local affordability standard, then they can still check the box for the HUD funding to say, oh, we provided affordable housing, right? Because it met the federal definition. On top of that, we've had situation after situation where the companies who develop housing, who get tax incentives locally and all that, they say that they're going to allocate a certain percentage of those housing units to people from our community who qualify. And a lot of people in the community do qualify. Yet when they cut the ribbon and open the place, the people who look like us, who were asking for this, aren't the ones they're moving in. They're moving in students, right? Which creates tension between students of the universities and the community, because the community is like, why do you get better stuff than I do? And I'm the one who did the work to get it. Yeah. So I think it's always going to exploit the fact, a couple facts. One, America is one of the few countries in the world where housing is not deemed to be a right.
Right.
Housing in America is a commodity.
Well, and you can own a gun before you can own a house.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Housing is a commodity. On top of that, there's nobody in any recognized public education system who is going to teach you how the mortgage process works. Right. So if you don't have a rich uncle or somebody who's been through this to sit down and tell you how it works, you are basically feeding yourself to the wolf, right? Unless you do a lot of independent research. Right. Well, independent research these days means that you have internet. So if you don't have internet, screwed, right? Yeah. And so I think they're always going to exploit issues where they know that there's this vast inequality of power and of money. Right. But I think also one of the things that I've been trying to encourage people is we see now this phenomenon with rents in Durham County perpetually increasing. Yep. And at this point, there are people who legit pay a higher rate of rent than I pay in a house payment. Right. So I try to tell them, like, have you ever thought about looking into a mortgage? Here's some information that I can help you out with on where to go. Oh, you work for the state. You can go to the state employee credit union. Like just being able to help connect people with resources to figure out. I don't say it's the money. I say it's the value of your money, right? So you can pay $1,300 however you want to pay $1,300, but it's the value of it. Wouldn't you rather pay $1,300 to have something that's yours? Right. And that, the other thing I say is I came into law in a time where, unfortunately, all the things that were ravaging poor communities were big business, right? Nobody was doing them to advocate for the poor community. Everybody was representing banks. So foreclosures. Everybody was rushing to try to be on the list to be a substitute trustee. Yep. I was one of the few people who did foreclosure defense work in a time when that was not lucrative and not popular, but I just got tired of seeing so many people get screwed over for their homes. One of the things I like for anybody who's interested in law or who is a current law student, I want people to understand that we are sold a narrative that if you don't work for a big firm or you don't work for a big bank or some company that you are somehow not as good of an attorney or that you are not as smart of an attorney. And that is simply not true. I used to win all those cases because the people who do the work are so accustomed to the process of getting what they want that when you come in and you challenge them with laws, regulations, details on the paperwork that they didn't read, right? When you challenge them on that and they have to have an answer for it and they don't have an answer for it, they start losing cases. And the thing about a foreclosure case as opposed to an eviction is in North Carolina, we are the second fastest evicting state in the nation.
Yep.
The whole process here can be done roughly in 27 days, 27
right? Days. Yep.
In a foreclosure action, I've had clients who were able to go without making house payments for 3 or 4 years because the bank didn't have what they needed to have together to pursue the foreclosure, or because the bank, which really isn't in the business of real estate, they're just in the business of making money, they may not necessarily have a buyer that's that actively searching for that particular property. And so it's not worth the investment to try to fight it and get the foreclosure. They're just trying to scare people into paying.
Right.
On top of that, banks don't do the best job of telling you what your federal options are when it comes to modifications on your mortgage loans. It's not as easy as you didn't pay the mortgage, so we take your house. No. It's supposed to be you didn't pay the mortgage. Let's talk. Let's get you evaluated for these different programs that we offer to see if we can arrange repayment over a longer scale. And people who have parents who've been through this, they can do this. Not to mention, the Black community gets set back yet again because one of the things that people achieve when you own a home is generational wealth.
Right.
What I mean by that is home values, for the most part, except for the 2010s, home values generally increase. So if you bought a house in the 1960s for roughly $60,000, that house nowadays may be worth $180,000 to $200,000. So if your kid inherits that or you deed it over to that kid, they now have an asset that they can flip and use to start a business, to pay for college, to do whatever they need without having to go into debt. Well, for many of us, again, the law, we didn't have a Fair Housing Act at all until 1968.
And
that was like pulling teeth.
We still have redlining today. Redlining has not gone away.
Absolutely. We still have red lines today, but we didn't even have the government acknowledging that you could have a house until 1968. So the fact that everybody else has this incredible advantage where they've been able to stack generational wealth through their properties and pass them down, you're starting at a position where for a lot of people, you are the first person in your family to buy a house. So navigating this whole process to figure out how to get it, and then once you have it, to be that first person to be able to have it, maintain it, it's incredible. It's a game changer. And it really can set the stage for your kids, your future generations to not have to struggle as much. But the other drawback is if people don't appreciate the value that home ownership carries with it, then they're not going to appreciate the inherited generational wealth. So they'll say, well, this company's here, they're going to sell it for, they're going to pay me $150,000. That's more money than I've ever seen. And you rush off looking at the money as opposed to looking at, well, how much would it be for me to
buy another
remodel or redo my house, right? Like maybe half the thing about real estate, and I learned this the hard way, the game of real estate is first rule, location, location, location. If somebody's coming to your house, knocking on your door, offering money, it's not just because they like your house. It's because they have a vision for the location you're in, and they're already looking 5-10 years down the road at what is to be. So if they're coming to you, they're trying to buy you not so much out of the building, they're trying to buy you off of that land.
Yeah.
And you need to evaluate, not to say that they're all bad deals. For some people, it might be great, but you need to evaluate whether or not you might be able to repurpose your land yourself to take part in the economic boom that may be forthcoming.
Right.
A lot of people in downtown Durham, I remember growing up, downtown Durham, if you weren't paying a water bill, it was desolate, right? And they used to have a program where the city was trying to give people money to use the buildings downtown. Well, we didn't take advantage of that. We didn't even know about that. So now they have all these places that are bought up. You got 21C Museum and
Absolutely.
all these restaurants coming in. They got a skyscraper now.
Mm-hmm.
And now that they have all these things that are significantly increasing the value of downtown Durham, now we're not in a position to really even be able to buy back in. And that's really sad because, people talk about historic Paris Street. Like this is like a big deal for the Black community. And to not own Paris Street, I think is a disservice to our legacy.
Yeah.
And so it's just, there are a lot of things that go, and real estate has always been the thing that will exploit everything to try to set up to keep people concentrated in certain areas and not be able to get access out, whereas other areas are allowed to grow and flourish, and typically that divides along racial lines.
Yeah. But just I think one of the things that really is shocking to me, Aaron Klein, I don't know if you know him, he's a fellow at Brookings Institute. And he and I chatted one day last week. And we were talking about underbanked and unbanked, right? So, and that's prevalent in the Black and brown communities. We go to check cashing places where they take lop off some of the money, or, that time from the time you get paid to the time the check makes it into your account where the funds are available to you. I mean, all of these things that you're describing, and I'll say Hilton Head is an example of that completely. So Hilton Head used to be predominantly Black, marshlands and all these things. And white people saw, wow, it's warm, this is nice looking, I can do something with this. And so Black people lost their land. And I think that's still true today. What's happening back then still carries forward today. But I think the thing that to me that stands out most is how often we are undermined by those who are supposed to help us, right? So, I had somebody ask me about trust, do Black people trust white people? I said, that's an interesting question because I don't know the answer to the question. I don't speak for all Black people, but I am leery of white people. I don't, if a white person says, come on, we're going to go downtown and protest, I'm going to want to be the one who's going to jail, not him, or her, I'm the one. So, regulations and how the law works almost always works against Black and brown communities in every way possible. And I think for Black women, and you talked about your mother, which sounds like she's an amazing woman. Malcolm X said in 1962, the most disrespected, most neglected, most abused woman is a Black woman. And people don't understand the importance of being Black in your own community and seeing each other, like creating your own community. Like we don't trust each other. So we don't trust white people and we don't trust each other. So what we end up being these little islands that are not connected, there's water all around us and we're not connected to each other. And that's how the systematic racism continues to grow because we don't know how to bring those islands together for one purpose. And to me, that's why I asked you earlier, like in my area, so I work in technology, emerging technology. So I'll give you a good example, East Durham. So if you run an algorithm to find out what's happening in East Durham, so right off from downtown on East Durham, you put in the zip code for East Durham, the algorithm is going to tell you need more police. It's going to tell you need to increase the rates of insurance. You're going to need to have all these things in order to go into East Durham, right? So this algorithm has defined the Black community in this little small batch of code that says, whenever you white person decide to go in this thing, you've got to bring more police in, which goes back to your point you made earlier, right? So why is there such a huge police presence down in East Durham versus West Durham? Well, Black, brown, and white. And every once in a while, there are a few of us that live on the margins of white, but for the most part, our lives can be decimated in minutes because someone who is in charge decides your fate, not yourself. That's why I think Black and brown communities really need to come together and they need education. And to me, if that's going to be your community activist, I think that's an amen, because not only just in some of the regular things in law, policing and, those kind of things, but banking, so how can you put your savings account in a bank? I don't care what bank it is, and they give you 1%. But when you get a loan from them, especially an unsecured loan, it's 10, 11%. So how is this story being told? So I can't afford to live. So I'll tell you something. So I think Judge Webster, don't you? Downtown Federal Magistrate.
I've met him before.
Yeah. So anyway, every once in a while, I'll go sit in his court. We go have lunch. I'll go sit in his court. And there are people in there because they haven't paid their rent-a-center bill getting a charge, like a felony charge for rent-a-center. What the hell is that? So I think that we really must find a way to educate ourselves and come together to create a community, And I think that God blessed you and gifted you with a wonderful mother, but also a very inquisitive nature. You want to know more. You're not going to just scratch the surface. You're going to try to drill all the way down. The problem is, at some point, somebody's going to stop you from doing that. So how they stop you, I don't know. But somebody's going to stop you from doing that. And, white people want black people to be docile and quiet. Yes, master, no, master, I'm coming. Are you sick, master? This kind of nonsense. If you don't comply with that, especially if you're working in their spaces, right? So, predominantly white institutions, whether it's corporate or nonprofit, whatever it is, you are going to get labeled, stereotyped. You're going to find yourself getting pushed farther and further and further out. And that's exactly what happened to me with my employer, right? Just push you until there's no more else to go. And so their intent is to decimate you, right? So I can say I care about what happens in Black communities and do absolutely nothing. I told you I care about what happens in Black communities. So what else is there? So my last question is this about Mr. Floyd. So you saw the video.
Yes.
What was your impression?
For 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I saw somebody who they complied with what they were asked about. They didn't understand what was going on or why it was happening. They sought any kind of relief that they could, but a police department didn't care. And I wish I could say that it was moved or that it was something new that triggered emotion for me, but I've seen this. Like I've seen this happen over and over, and I feel like, we're in a very unique place. This is the only thing that I think is really different now, is we're seeing a lot of corporate interests at least acting like they want to be involved in the movement. And maybe that provides some traction that we haven't previously seen before if people actually hold them accountable. But at the end of the day, I am not convinced that this phenomenon of police brutality is just going to be over.
Right.
I mean, we saw it. I mean, Rashard Brooks was less than a week after that. So like we know that this is going to continue to happen. Particularly given the
Spelman and the Morehouse students were tased going to get something to eat.
Absolutely.
I mean, so absolutely it's still continuing.
Absolutely. But this is the thing that makes this moment in history unique. It is not lost on me that the protest seeking justice for Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd all came on the heels of the Reopen movement.
Right.
When people armed to the teeth invaded state capitals and were forcing the state to act when it was a time of a global pandemic, and we should have all been at home, right? So these people came down and they got immediate responses. Government started finding ways to open it up, be it opening all the southern states up for regular business, be it having a phase-in system, like whatever the case may be. People changed overnight. Well, the problem is with police brutality, folks have been asking for change for decades. And we can't get it, but these people got change in a week. And the only difference is they ran in there with weapons, which we are always trying to be nonviolent. So I think what that did was first it established, oh, well, y'all have the ability to do stuff. You've just been feeding us a line. Then what it did was when people came out still peacefully protesting, you start spraying them with rubber bullets, tear gas, all this other stuff. That's the stuff that drives people to be upset and angry. So it's not only that you want to continue the devaluation of Black humanity, but now, I mean, when I saw the old man in Buffalo, the old white man in Buffalo, New York, get shoved down by the police, and I was like, if y'all will do your senior citizens like that, then we're not even on the same conversation.
We don't stand a chance.
So I'm on a new wave now. My wave now is I want the Black community to realize and appreciate the power that we have. And the way to do that, and I know it's not the most affordable way. One of the benefits for me is I do traveling outside of the country. Before COVID, every other year I'm going out of the country. When you see Black people in other countries, you're still gonna see poverty. You're still gonna see the imposition of white supremacy, even though it might look like colonialism or whatever the case may be. But what you don't necessarily see is the fragmentation, like what you've been talking about here, because the system there is designed in such a way that at least as a community of people, folks feel like we're all going through this together.
Right.
In America, we feed you carrots. We say, you're not like the rest of them. You are special. Right. And because you're special, you can get millions of dollars. You can get access to this. And for a lot of people, even folks that I feel like I went to school with, that's good. They're like, I'm not here for everybody else. I'm here for me.
Right.
I used to be judgmental about that. Like I used to feel some kind of way about it. But what I've also realized is you need some of those people to win. Right. Because some of those people will bring that money back to the community. They'll open businesses that hire. The problem that I see, though, is I think it's very easy to take that path and get complacent. So that's why, even though I love my job, I love that I've been given the opportunity to help out my community through the position that I have. You always have to be having other moves going on outside of work. So I have a company. I have investments in the community. I have other things that I have to do because, like you said, any day somebody can come by and say, well, you done said too much. That's it. But I would encourage people to get out and travel and build connections, because the other thing I've discovered is Black people as a whole, we're a lot bigger than what we thought we were, right? We have numbers and we have people in almost every continent on this planet, and they're all going through something similar. And for the most part, most people are pretty personable and cool with you. So you can get to know them. You can find out what issues are going on there. In my mind, I always look at that and say, we have a potential here to subvert the white supremacist power structure by creating our own networks amongst ourselves.
Absolutely.
Right? So we can make our own products and sell them to ourselves. They can make products and sell them to us. We can make businesses and support each other's businesses. I was talking to a friend of mine last night in Lagos, Nigeria, and he's part of the film industry because, they got Nollywood. They're doing all kinds of amazing stuff from Nollywood, and they're finally getting some respect on an international field, right? So my position is that if we build relationships and get to know each other, see how Black people interact in other parts of the world, then maybe we'll start understanding better. And it's not a one-sided thing, because I think that in other parts of the world, most people don't have the access to the resources that we have. So things we take for granted, like a library, internet, right? Things we take for granted really are night and day for people in other places. If you know,
the United States,
including,
with COVID pushing students out, Black and brown children are the ones that's hurt the most, because
absolutely,
not every home has internet. Not every home has access to a library. And when, these places being closed or being limited in number,
absolutely.
I would just tell you, what I admire the work that you're doing. I think it's God's work. It's absolutely God's work, but I will tell you, there has to be some system that's put in place that people are educated, because what's coming, the technology that's coming is going to disrupt almost every single industry that there is. We were sitting out on the porch this morning. My husband and I went out and sat on the porch this morning, and we saw the trash truck come by, right? And so, it's a little hand that reaches down there, pick up the trash can and dump it in the container on the truck. And there's a guy, and all he's doing is driving. He isn't doing anything else. Now, just think about that for a minute. So cars that don't need a driver, for businesses that don't need a person to check you out, you keep adding them up, right? So all this technology is coming, and the Black and brown communities are going to get smacked right upside the head again and again and again. And so I always tell people my favorite story is Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Have you ever seen it? Do you remember the part where the father loses his job because they were giving away all the secrets? The father loses his job, and they replace him with a machine. And then he gets to go back and fix the machine at some point in time. That's what Black people need to know. You need to get those skills that when that job replaces you, you have another opportunity to do something else. You're not just now sitting on the sideline, in poverty areas or crime-ridden areas or whatever. You are a part of that structural change.
Absolutely.
And how do you make that so? So as I was saying to you earlier, like, we all on our own little island, right? And so when, who Drake is, the rapper Drake?
I do.
When he first came out, there was all this language about team light skin, right? what the hell is that? Like, so young people around here hollering about team light skin, team dark skin. And in a video that Drake and Chris have, they said it again. Chris Brown said, they said it again, team light skin. What the hell is that? If you're Black, I have family members that look so damn white they could pass in them. You wouldn't even know they were Black, right?
Mm.
But that's that one drop rule.
Mm.
So why can't we come together? Why can't we come together to educate each other, support each other, shop Black businesses, invest your money in mechanics and farmers, all of the things that give Black people some leverage, some power. That's not what we do. And I can't wait for you to tell me how you're going to fix all that, because I'm going to be right.
I wish I had answers for all of that. I don't know.
Figure this out. You got the community activism thing going on. A large network of people who will come to your aid. All you got to do is pick up the phone. Hey, I need you, and they're coming, including me. I'm coming. What do you need? Because at the end of the day, we are us. We are us. Absolutely. And no matter what you look like, whether you're light, dark, good hair, bad hair, whatever that means, we're still us. And until we recognize that we are us and not team light skin or team dark skin or team basketball or team whatever, we are us. And so my favorite one is OJ, right? So OJ became white after he played football, became a superstar. He running through airports, jumping over things and all that stuff. And white people reminded him, hey, no, you're still Black. That's that lesson that we have to learn over and over and over again. I don't care how far you get. Oprah had the same trouble. Somebody out there in Texas complained about her just saying something about states. Tiger Woods, Michael Jordan, you name whoever it is. We need to be us and not singling ourselves out for failure, right? So if there's just one Jesse McCoy, you cannot win. You want a bunch of Jesse McCoys with you, standing with you, supporting you, helping you when you trip and fall and get back up.
Absolutely.
That's why I don't understand why Black people don't understand that. I don't understand that. And I don't understand why the Black and brown communities don't get this together, because every single thing that's happened with civil rights gave Black and brown community, Black, brown, and orange and yellow community civil rights. Voting right, Black men were able to vote for white women were. Why don't we see this as, what's good for Blacks is good for the populace, it's good for humanity, instead of what we have here. So
right. But I agree with all that.
Yeah. So, I'm kind of lost by it, but it is what it is. But I meant what I said, all you got to do is pick up the phone and call or text or whatever it is. I'm coming to whatever you
Well,
need.
I appreciate that.
I'm coming. And I think, you got a well-connected network that also will show up for you. So, education is the only thing I know. And I don't mean going to sit in a class, but, understanding what you were saying about how to get a mortgage, right? Or when somebody makes you an offer on your land, or your property, what can you do with that? Leaving, a simple thing is a will, right? So majority of Black people die intestate, right? No will, no nothing. Right. And so who gets to decide? The state, right? So, I think these things are things that we need to continue to talk about and educate people so that they can make good decisions. You could have the simplest will in the world. I, Rochelle Newton, leave everything to my husband or my child and nothing else. You get it notarized. It's your last will and testament. You said what you're going to do. So I just think it's a lot to do. And I'm so grateful you chatted with me today, but we're going to have 3 or 4 more chats. We got some more stuff we got to go down.
Yeah. I'm hoping you'll bring me back on.
Oh, absolutely. We got way more stuff to talk about. We got to figure out how we figure out what the answer is for, how people move through a community where you're invisible, valueless, and voiceless, right? And, you become the token Black person, like, so in IT where I work, most of the time I go to a meeting, I'm the only person that look like me. Why is that? This is 2020. Why is that? Like, you can't find other Black women, you can't find Black men. Why is that? And so I think these are discussions that really need to be carried forward. And I think if you come back, I'd really like to talk about the community activism so we can figure out how to help you, how we can bring resources to you to help you, and what is it that you need? How do we help to make sure that we are making a mark within our communities? Because if not, we will be like this forever. You can protest day and night until you get wealth, until you get equality. I won't even talk about reparations, but until you get those things, you're literally, voiceless. You're invisible. Somebody could walk in, do a report, and say, well, we don't need these people. And in the middle of a pandemic, they terminate people. you know, let people, that's because we don't have any power of our own.
Mm.
So community activism in August.
Sounds good.
Are
Shoot
you,
me an email. We'll make it work.
yeah, are you teaching this fall? Are you doing your
I'm teaching social justice lawyering in the civil justice clinic this fall.
in person or remotely?
Both remote.
Oh, excellent. Very, very good. So I will send you some times in August, maybe about the same time in August that we'll be able to catch up some. But I do want you to tell us more about this community activism and how we can help, you know, because I will tell you my, the persons who have helped me get these chats going really is very much interested in Black and brown causes and how do we get that together. It's a Black person, you know, so I think that there are people with resources that we can pull upon, but you know, you have some faculty over there who need you as well. So, you know, you're gonna need to help them, you know, along the way and, you know, create your own community within the law school so that you all are closely knitted together as you're working on projects and stuff like that. You have common interest in things like that, you know, so I'm really grateful for this. Jesse, thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And
I
go and
appreciate
give your mama a kiss because she's the one right there. That's the one right there. That's all that needs to be said is she's the one. So go home and give her a kiss. Mom, I love you so much. Just, you know, wrap her up in your arms and, you know, let her know, you know, I am who I am because of you.
Will do.
Thank
Will
you so
do.
much, Jesse. I'll
Well,
talk
thank
to you.
you so much. You have a good day.
I'm gonna send you a link to this video when it converts so you can look at it and see if there's anything, you know, we need to talk about. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, dear. Be
All
safe.
right. You have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.